Rolling. All right, welcome to the virtual brown bag. I don't have my intro slide deck here, but virtual brown bag, a place where we get together every week. We share tips and tricks and experiences and challenges, usually related to software development, oftentimes also related to like soft skills type of things, like interviewing people or going through job interviews and things from the architectural standpoint, whatever we have been working on recently, and we want to have a conversation about. This is it. No predefined agenda. We do this every Thursday from 12 to 1 Central Time, and that's it. What have you guys been up to? What's happening in your corner of the world?
I'm on break. I'm on vacation out in Florida, so.
Oh yeah.
that's been mine. And unfortunately, with the two kids now, it's not. I don't really get. Previously on vacation, like if my wife went to sleep or something, I'd get to or have my mornings where I could hack around and stuff. But nope, not anymore. Got to take them to the pool twice a day, to the beach once a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you're collapsing asleep. My daughter got locked in a bedroom yesterday, and we had to dismantle the door.
Dismantle the door.
Yeah, full take apart the doorknob because 2-year-old had turned the lock or something.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sounds like fun.
Yep. Yeah. So what did I have going on? Oh, I went to I attended Gochko Adzik. You remember him? Who he is?
That's a BD guy, right?
Yeah, he was big in BDD. So
the one behind the SpecFlow, isn't it?
I don't remember if he did SpecFlow, but he was big in BDD. He wrote the Specification by Design book, which I still want to read, but it's I think it's good. It's clear just from what I've read is good. He's been doing a lot of stuff on product ownership and developing good features and stuff like that. So he had a seminar on something he's been working on called he's been promoting this for 10, 15 years, called impact mapping. So he did a talk on it yesterday, out in Italy, and I actually got a chance to join for a little bit. So that was kind of interesting. So the process of impact mapping, it's a relatively simple exercise to help you identify features, but you're basically asking, you're starting with a goal in mind, we want to have a certain impact on people. We want to, increase time on the page by 30% or something like that, right? And then there's a little process you go through, you kind of drawing a tree about identifying actors who might have people in different roles that people might affect that goal, and different things that might influence that actor in this direction, and kind of so it's a way to ideate these features. So he had, his talk wasn't really specifically about impact mapping. It was more just for people who have already been doing it, kind of as an update and some tips and tricks that he had. But that was pretty cool. Some of the stuff he talked about, getting a line, everyone that's showing up there. Basically, his talk was structured more as hey, I've been doing this now I've been training people now in this for 10 years. Here are the things that we've learned from experience. So stuff like getting agreement from everyone on what the goal is before they actually show up. And he's and that's probably the biggest thing when you're getting CEOs and VPs and everyone in the room. You're going to find out really quickly that nobody has the same goals. in mind. And I mean, like they should, they're the leadership team, but they probably don't. Um, so getting broad agreement on that, if you don't, it will be an entire day of the thing. Um, so so his extra recommendations, one I've seen a lot for as a good way of brainstorming is having everyone write stuff down and then individually, and then share a little bit by bit and iterate on that in order to synthesize a new goal. Um, and also, this was an interesting point that he has had was to avoid discussing deliverables, right? Like anything that you want to deliver, like, if you want to deliver something, delivering something is not an impact. So it's not a goal, right?
Mm.
Um, you can talk about a deliverable as a way to connect yourself to an impact, but then like erase the deliverable from the board. So it's not like distracting from what you're trying to achieve, right? Yeah.
Mm.
So that was an interesting one. He talked about let's see, I'm looking at my notes. Doing an example impact map in a related context, not in your specific context, because then you prime everyone for the conversation um, for that specific solution. But doing examples in related contexts is good. Um, Direction matters more than the actual number. So if
Mm.
you're saying we want to shift, user presence, how long people stay on the site by 30%. The 30, not such a big deal. That's very much negotiation. But the thing that you're trying to do and the direction you're trying to do it, that's the big deal to get agreement on, right?
Mm.
Um, and percentage can be nicer, right? You want the site to load 30% faster, right? Um, okay, like so. Um, you do that again. Number not so important as much as the direction. And I would add to it personally, probably like kind of order of magnitude, right? We want to double the speed of the site versus increase its speed by 30%. That's going to drive different conversations if you say those two things.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah. Oh, and another thing he said, like just in their initial conception, there wasn't a place in the impact map, just as far as like the diagram is concerned, to add like context or constraints on solutions. And he's like, so basically, what you see a lot of the times when you don't provide space for that on the diagram is like all these side conversations devolve where people still need to talk about those things, but they can't talk about entire some maps, so it's happening separately. So just freaking find a place on the map to write that stuff down. It's better. Like, okay, it will be a pure impact map, but it's still better. Like the point is the conversation, not the structure. That you come up with your own structure. And he recommended a book, which I'll pull up here, uh, Four Disciplines of Execution. And he said it's been a really, really excellent book. I'll put it in the chat for him. He thought it really hit a lot of a lot of the good points there. So there we go. And so I haven't read it yet, but I added it to my Audible, so it's on the board. This is Gochko's book, by the way, on this technique.
Say that again. It's a what book?
So the second book I posted, that's Gochko's book on the same technique. Yeah. Yeah.
Saving it to my list too.
Yeah, product management, product ownership stuff. This is great, good stuff.
Achieving your wildly important goals.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You're like, yes, I would like that.
Yeah, right. I dig it. Yeah. Good. Yeah, of course, like the frequently bought together shows good to great. It It does seem related.
Mm-hmm. So that was one thing I had to talk about.
Let me ask you this on
Yeah.
the like when they talk about say yeah one of our goals is like to increase time people spend on a page by this amount. Do they talk about like okay why is it important that they spend more time on that page?
I so I think that conversation would mostly come from before. So right, so this is in the finer grain, right? You decide your goal, you want the goal, right? And then you're figuring out how to achieve that goal, right?
Gotcha.
So this is a bit more finer grained. Um, and it's usually for higher level goals, like more business goals, right? Rather than like individual users trying to achieve goal.
Mm-hmm.
But then the implementation part of it. All right, we have this higher level goal, like spend more time on page. Like that's a higher level thing. That's a business concern. Um, but then and I mean, like the why is going to be like we want them to buy more stuff, right? Um, but then the exercise is really about all right. Well, thinking through what are the different ways you can affect that change,
Mm,
um, and what the implications of that are. Yeah,
okay.
so it's kind of a different side of that coin.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sounds good. That's pretty cool. Yeah. See. Oh, see.
Yeah. So that's been my thing. What's everyone else been up to?
Yeah, John, I see that's Alper also logged in. What's been floating your boats recently?
Hey guys,
Hey,
Hey,
Alper.
Albert.
how's it going? Yeah, yeah,
Good.
I'm just working on some security stuff. We're just the same story. Startup buys up a bought up by a big company, and then the big company wants the startup to use their own security system, get rid of your own custom logging system, and use our big login system. So we're just working on that one.
Mm.
A lot of fun.
It's like a lot of fun. Hmm.
Yeah. Any interesting lessons learned or concerns you're running into there?
Well, I mean, the one of the things that I learned, which actually I relearned, I guess, the fact that a little bit of requirements engineering goes a long way. So we have, for our project, we have the web client, and this software just ingest design information from all these different desktop products. Like it can
Mm-hmm.
be AutoCAD, it can be some other design programs like Revit. So they have all these some third party, some desktop applications, some Excel plugins that just feed data into this application, right? That's what they call it, publishing data. So in order to do that, they have all these uh, code that's in there that just pops up a browser. So we want them to use, they have to log in before they can publish the data. So some of the old ones, the plugins are built in WPF, which I successfully avoided learning throughout my entire career with the XAMLs and stuff. And so that just pops up like a browser. So it just imagine like like I mean it's a WPF form that has an embedded browser in it, and then we're just trying to drive the browser so that they can just log in. Once they get a login, they get a token, so they're able to publish data from a third-party application, all that. So at the beginning of the project, we were thinking, oh my god, we're gonna have to go update all that stuff. This is just gonna be a mess, and we're just gonna have to tell the people to upgrade and all that. well, we just, instead of doing that, we just changed we downgraded the login page to just work with any and every kind of JavaScript or browser that's out there. So we just downgraded it to, so that the JavaScript on the login page, it would work with, say, IE, because we don't even know what kind of browser engine that WPF uses, and we didn't really want to spend time to figure it out, right? So you have your WPF form, and there's some kind of like a browser control in there. It is some version of IE, but we're not really sure which one. So we made sure that our login page work with all these different desktop applications. They're using all these different ways of logging in. That just enabled us to work with just all of our changes went into the login page. We just got that working, and then from that point on, we just basically removed the custom authentication stuff. That really saved us tons of time, because we didn't have to just go do testing to make sure that the desktop applications, the Excel plugins, and all those things were working as expected, because we didn't make any code changes in them. So that was kind of, that just saved us and not really technical, but it's kind of like, we found another way of getting it done, so that just helped us avoid a lot of headache.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember back in the day doing this kind of integration with the browser. Yeah, it was usually like an ActiveX control that was a wrapper around some version of IE.
Yeah, exactly like that. And it's just like there are some stuff that you just mark the class with something, and then as com visible or something like that, and then that .NET class becomes visible. I mean, the data from that .NET class becomes visible to the browser control and all that. And we're like, oh no, we really don't want to get into this, because I mean, at one point we already looked at some other browser controls. There's kind of like a CFP browser control for WPF, and that's based on Chrome. So it's like, that's going to be a good one, because it has like the latest JavaScript stuff will work on it and all that. But that was just basically one desktop control. There are other desktop controls. Some of them are written VB6, some of them are Excel plugins, and like, yeah, we're not going to do any of those because some of those things may go away. So it was kind of like an ROI decision. Like, yeah, let's not get into the dragons den. Like, let there be dragons. We'll just change the login page, make sure it just works with everything. I'll just call it done.
Right. That sounds cool. Yeah, I've been. This morning was a pretty interesting, productive meeting. So, established with the team that every 2 weeks we have our backlog refinement session where the whole team participates. And so we just today started a practice where before starting our refinement session, we spent about like 40 minutes or so doing some modeling, like identifying context mapping, making sure that, okay, does our current understanding of the system actually map to how we have our bounded context laid out, and the integration between the different domains and all of that, and have it to a point where at any point in time anybody on the team should be able to walk up to a whiteboard and sketch out, okay, these are the domains, this is how they integrate, and the main domain events that we have and who are usually interested in those events. So that's been a very good exercise. Everybody seems to have enjoyed it. Just, it adds clarity to the things that we are working on. The product owner also walked in the room and he saw it on whiteboard, and he appreciated like seeing the team's understanding of the business. So that's pretty cool. Sorry, I didn't catch what Hopper said. Good idea or understanding evolves as we learn more. That's exactly right. At one point, somebody said, "Oh, should we capture that and put it into some sort of tool and create those images?" I said, no, no, no. We're snapping a photo, putting somewhere where it can share. But the idea is that that's not settled in stone. The idea is, okay, every sprint we are learning about the domain. We are reinterpreting or getting a better understanding of what the business actually is. So we want to be flexible with changing that interpretation as we learn. The collective learning. So that's been an interesting experience. I like how on that DDD book that I'm reading by Von Vernon, one thing that I got there that I like how he explains is that many times people think of the business, the stakeholders, the domain experts as like they really know their business, and many times it's like no, they don't, because many times it's just like, oh, we've been doing this for 15 years. We just take some things for granted, but then as developers, we have to like learn from the business and hopefully like mirror it back to them. So essentially like helping them shape up what their business actually looks like. So having this like image on the board with the context maps and all that and see where things play together, like, oh yeah, that is like bringing a better understanding to the business folks that in a way that they were not seeing it. It's pretty cool. Something that has been going on my end here. Another thing that's we've been doing successfully many sprints ago. We received this request from our PO to just share a little bit of the like the technical side of things. Like, okay, why have we decided, for example, to go with this technology? Why have we made the decision to, go with this kind of architectural approach? More in the sense of just for his own sake of learning a little bit about these things. That, all right, let's do that. So what we've done was to introduce like a 5 to 10 minute block at our sprint review sessions to just go over some of those things, right? From a high level standpoint, okay, this is a little bit of technology that we've aggregated to the solution this sprint. This is the reason why. This is what it buys us. So for example, when we've introduced mass transit, for example, so we brought that up. It's like, okay, this is something that we brought into the project. This is the problem that it solves. This is how it's going to bring value to the product. And that's being very well received. It's something that the stakeholders are really appreciating and feeding us back, say, yeah, keep doing that. It does help, just adding transparency to the things that we are doing.
Alper put in the chat architectural decision records.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. I've seen that before. I think it just puts some structure around this, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, that's always a good idea.
Right.
Cool. Yeah, I mean that's a really good point, because you can always go back to the code and then see what we're doing and how we're doing it, but a lot of the time the why is kind of lost in history, and that's what it's supposed to document.
That's right.
Oh shit! There's I hadn't browsed this repo before. There's like tooling that they're actually doing for it. It's sharp, just in all the different languages. So I guess we were doing that. Okay, and so that's going to enforce so it's going to be dumping everything into a specific directories with a certain structure. Okay. That's gonna be, I almost wanted to see more structure on this, so this could be like queried, but that's a fine idea. I don't have a problem with it. It'd be, I guess, one criticism would be it'll be a little weird to keep in your source code if you keep all your other documentation in a wiki like Confluence. it'd be a little weird and not what you'd expect, but it's not like the end of the world or anything.
Yeah, and the other thing maybe like I don't know how much Claudio is spending time on it, but if this becomes like an end in itself, like you find yourself spending a lot of time just doing the ADRs and just website and all that, so that may become like too process heavy, like maybe too good of a thing, so that you're just spending so much time on it. Then it's supposed to be lightweight, I guess. So there's always that danger of just going too deep into it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
See, well, one other thing I could bring up. So a couple of these ago, I talked about how I got my copy of Grokking Simplicity. I've been going through this book. I've been going. I on vacation, so I've had time to like sit down with a highlighter and a pen and start reading this. This book is phenomenal. I'm really, really impressed with it. I would say as a target audience of like developers that are like between like a couple years in to maybe like 10 years would be like the most impact. Because a lot of those, if you're like at that point, we're like, all right, I'm situated, I've gotten my breath, and then I want to keep going better, especially if you're interested in like functional patterns. Not so much functional programming directly, but just kind of bringing those patterns to your source code. The patterns that he's talking about are super, super simple. They're not design patterns. They're more like ways of thinking about design. And so he introduces them. He attacks each pattern from like a bunch of different angles, and then he has a bunch of drills and exercises in the book, just one after the other, after the other, after the other. And he keeps it really simple. All the code examples are in like old school JavaScript to kind of really drive home the point that it's not about the language.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been quite impressed with the book. So like he spends several chapters talking about mutability and why mutability is a problem. I really like his conception of like, if you modify an object in a function, if you're modifying, like, not that if you create an object and then modify it and then return it, that's fine. That's just building up the object. But if an object is passed to you and you make a modification to it, that's an implicit return from your function, right? You are implicitly returning something from your function. You just don't say it, right? Because there is a side effect to your function running.
Yeah.
At the same time, if you are taking in an object and then making decisions based on something that's inside of a mutable object, then that's an implicit additional parameter into your function, right? Because that might be different, even though that reference is not different. So, and if you start thinking about, I mean, like, so you're looking at a function, you're like, why is this so hard to work with? Well, because if you really trace down through it, you have 17 outputs and 50 different inputs, and we would all bristle about that and hate it if we saw it and we're like, this is, you would have a problem with it if you saw a function like that, and you wouldn't ask the question, why is this so difficult to maintain? But we hide that away with mutability, and it's still there, and there's your answer. So that's he really hits that nail hard. He hits like the patterns to get away from that hard. It's where you want to do it. Also has a whole section on stratified design, which is what we might refer to as layering or layered architecture, but not layered architecture as an N-tier architecture, which is not how layering was ever conceived. Like, so layering, I don't remember if I said it here before, but like, if you talk about look at the history of layered software, like that was an Edgar Dijkstra like thing that he came up with. Like, Edgar Dijkstra, the famous mathematician. Do you think he was talking about what he was talking about was about having your persistence, your database saving stuff be together and having all your business logic stuff be together? And no, that's not how mathematicians talk, much less what he actually said. What it is, it's a way of thinking about separating concerns, and kind of Eric in this book really, he doesn't really talk about that explicitly. Like, it's not academic at all, but I feel like that's what he's channeling, and he's really talking about stratified designs. Like he has these little, let's see if I can zoom in on here. Maybe I can. He has these little diagrams that he's doing where, like, this is just a call diagram, right? Of how you're calling a function, what it calls, and how you can think about that as layering. This might not even be the best example, but because each of these layers kind of deal with different things, and ideally this layer shouldn't have to know any of the function that appears here, shouldn't have to know about anything about array built-ins, which implies, because if you did, then it would imply knowing that the underlying object that you're working on is an array, and that should be hidden away. And then, so he has these little diagrams in here, which are basically just call charts with lines drawn on them, but it's a really, really nice way of just visualizing that. If you just kind of twist your point of view from what we're kind of used to, which is like just keeping an eye on how many outgoing lines there are, or incoming lines, and which, I mean, among the people that even use these at all, and then more into thinking about how far those lines drop down, then it becomes a really useful kind of tool for that. Now, there's not an example here, but he has lots and lots of these charts, which are which I feel have been a very good way of talking about it. I'm going to finish this book, but I'll probably be pushing it to my team at work, and be like, get this so we can start at least talking about the same language, right? So, really enjoying it so far. I think it's a really good addition to the bookshelf. If you work with, I mean, it's good. I feel like it's giving me new ways of talking about certain things. But I mean, I think if I had gotten something like this when I was like 5 years in, 3 years in, I would have been like this is my thing. Like this is my jam. I would have loved that. It would have really saved me a lot of time to think that way. Yeah.
Same. It does sound like some of it made me think of Kent Beck's Implementation Patterns, which was a book I've read 15 years ago.
Yeah, I've never read that, but
it's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good. So it does have some similarities to what you just described, but then again, it's been like 15 years since I've read it. But I remember it stuck with me as a good book on that.
Yeah. The closest that it comes to talking about patterns in the like coding sense is when he talks about how to implement copy on write, right? So basically you have a shopping cart set price by name function that doesn't go in and change the object itself, but creates a copy of the object. And so that's really the closest that it comes to that, which is interesting. I mean, I do think he like skirts around the issue of class-based languages a little there, because like, by using JavaScript as an example, like it's easy to do copying in JavaScript. When you are using classes, it's a little harder, right? Because you have to have written those classes to allow copying to begin with, and it gets tough there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Interesting. So I like to swap it just quickly. You're a big book reader, much like I am. I'd love to hear about what is your process as far as like how do you decide what books you're gonna commit to, and how do you actually read it? Like, do you do some speed reading, or how do you better make like best out of the book? Do you take notes about it? Do you highlight on the book? How do you go about it?
Yeah, most of my most of my reading is audiobook. So, which
Okay.
means I can do conceptual. I can't do a lot of stuff very concrete that way. And I have been trying to take notes on it more specifically with audiobooks now. That basically boils down to I'm making a bookmark at the places where I think it's important. And then in theory, I should be going back every week and like re-listening to my bookmarks and doing that. Audible has a really terrible interface for that, and I just haven't been doing it. So
Okay.
I do, however, feel like at least the process of adding a bookmark makes it stick. With this book, where I have a physical book, which is unusual for me, I am actually sitting down, um, and highlighting and taking notes in the margin, because like I'd always avoid that because like, oh, resale value, and then I was like, what? Wait, what am I talking about? What am I gonna resell a book?
I used to be exactly like that. I broke that pattern about a year ago. It's like, who cares? I'm not going to be selling these books
Yeah,
anyways. They are
who
mine.
buys a book now? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
If someone ends up with this book, good. They'll learn something from my highlighting and notes.
Right.
um, yeah. So I've just been taking notes in the margin, thoughts, and highlighting parts that I feel are good to highlight on. Um, Especially because I know Eric, and I like, for the most part, I think it's great. But like the parts where I disagree with how he talks about stuff, I can, be like, here's the notes that I gave. You might consider this for a second edition.
Okay.
Yeah, I would love to get to a point where I'm sitting down at the end of a week and really entering everything into like org Rome and linking all the ideas together. I'm not there yet.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
First is reading before going to bed these days, taking notes.
Oh yeah.
I noticed that I have to be very specific about what books I'm gonna do audiobook, what book I'm gonna do like ebook or printed copy, because depending on the nature of the book, I don't like have the audible version because if I'm like driving and listening to it, and the thing is making me like think and wanting to actually just stop the car, pull over, grab a notepad and start making notes. And then I thought about the like bookmarking it to revisiting it later, but then I'm afraid that it's like, well, am I gonna be doing that later?
The
Right.
process of bookmarking helps.
Yeah.
Because if nothing else, you jump back to 30 seconds and set the bookmark so you'll re-listen to the 30 seconds at the very least. Um, I I didn't take a measurement or anything, but I do feel like that's been helping my retention. At least on the like couple of months scale. I don't know about long term.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing I've noticed is like Alper said, reading before going to bed. I do that as well. So nowadays I'm reading like in the morning, really early in the morning, and before going to bed. Now I make sure that the thing that I read before going to bed does not engage my mind. Because if I read something that's gonna get me thinking too much about it, then I cannot fall asleep because now my mind is like busy trying to work with that information or all excited about, oh yeah, you can do this and you can do that. It's like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be. So I have to be very specific about what I'm reading before going to bed. Interesting.
Yeah, I will say, like, I sometimes prefer podcasts, even when they're like the same type of like, history, cerebral, or geopolitics analysis podcasts. They're like the types of books that I like to take notes for, just because with a podcast, the app doesn't have the app option. I'm under no pressure to make notes. So I'm washing dishes or stuff like that. Like it's fine. So I sometimes listening for that reason specifically because I don't want to take notes. At the time, I'm fine with it just going in, attaching to some neurons influencing how I think, and then going away. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like when I go on trips, like road trips, and I'm gonna be driving for a number of hours, I always set aside like a mix of music, podcasts, and audiobooks. Because what I noticed is if I'm listening to an audiobook that's just like one person reading the book, depending on the topic, I may end up like phasing out, and it's like, oh, I don't even know what this person was saying anymore, right? With the monotone and all that. Now, if it's a book like, The Goal, where you have different people reading the parts, it keeps my mind actually going. Or if I notice that I'm like, okay, they are losing me on the book, then I'm like cranking a podcast where there's like at least two people talking, right? The interview type of thing that keeps me more engaged with receiving that content. Otherwise, my mind goes like, and I'm not processing anymore.
Yeah, that could very well be the thing with me for podcasts too. The multiple people. I've never really thought of that. Not all podcasts I listen to are multiple people, but that could certainly be a part of it.
I,
Do you listen to software development podcasts anymore?
I think oh man, it's been years since the
Me
last
too.
time I listened to any software podcast. Interesting. I don't know exactly. Like, I remember when I switched over to Rails, I was consuming like 3 or 4 different podcasts on Rails because I was like trying to absorb as much as I could. And then after that, maybe around 2014, 2015, I think that's as far back as I remember, like listening to any software related podcasts.
Yeah,
Interesting.
that's been the case for me too. I think last ever I listened to software related was in the around the same time, and yeah, it's just I've fallen out of it. I mean, a lot of it is kind of the same stuff over and over. I'm sure that's not the case with all of them. It's just
Right.
like, yeah, my drive for that specific thing has changed. Um, like every once in a while, I'll watch like a lecture on YouTube or like a YouTube thing, usually around Emacs about it. But even then, I find like a lot of the time I'm just not paying the attention that I want in order to get something out of it. Um, like the most I'll do is like if it's like a conference lecture with like some people that I really really admire, then especially if it's a conversation like you said, like if they do it as a panel rather than a lecture, then I'm definitely more involved and I'll sometimes sit through and watch the entire hour. But yeah, rarely am I doing development podcasts now. I listened to the software engineer radio with Javal Lowry when I was like researching whether I wanted to read the writing software book or not. But that was the last one. It was a couple of years ago.
Okay. So,
The Serverless Podcast. What's the Serverless Podcast, Hopper? What's that about?
It's about lambdas and stuff. I'll post the link. It's about AWS, mostly. I mean, it's mostly function as a service, but yeah, it's the mostly spend time on the AWS and lambda related stuff.
So are they like just kind of talking about like, Oh, so it's specifically about Lambda. It's not even like about AWS at large. Like, how much is there to talk about with
Yeah,
Lambda?
it's specifically around technologies where it's on demand. You pay for only what you use, and it scales down to zero, and you don't have to maintain anything, any infrastructure.
Okay, so just specifically those that category. Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, any kind of Lambda that when you talk about it, just always in conjunction with other services, right? And it may be AWS and SQS, queuing systems or notification systems, or now they have step functions or S3 or DynamoDB. So it just spreads around a little bit, but a lot of those things are right. You don't have to have manage any kind of infrastructure. It's all serverless, and it scales down to zero. You only pay for it when you use it. Like Lambda, right now you're paying per millisecond. So if you don't, faster it runs, less you pay. So
Yeah. And hey, there are services that let you use even that for free. Like I have Pipedream, and they're basically an interface over Lambdas, and they don't charge you. At least not. They don't charge you until you get to a professional tier. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, I mean, free tiers are so generous that you can just build a business, and you don't have to pay anything until you make some real serious money. So that's the kind of good thing. I mean, if you're building the right thing, and if you're paying customers, it's impossible to lose money. I mean, you're always going to be charging. So you're going to be charged only when customers use your service. When they use your service, you're going to be charging them a little bit more than what it costs to run the Lambda functions and anything else that you run. Then you should be in a pretty good place.
Yeah, I mean, you say you can't lose money. That's interesting, but because you definitely can, because you have to keep all that infrastructure up and available. It's just the large companies like Amazon who have it anyway can't use money. Like if you're trying to launch your own, you can get in trouble, right?
Well, I mean, if the paying customers are using your service, by definition, they're paying for it. So you're already covering all their costs. If nobody's using it, well, you're not paying for anything. So
you're still paying. It's still running. Oh, okay, you're talking about someone who uses serverless, not. Okay, I thought you were saying
as the operator, you're building a business you're building a startup on serverless. All your infrastructure is serverless. You're paying customers. As the owner of that business, unless you're just making some really bad decision, it's very hard to lose money.
Well, then you go and read what's the name, Corey, the AWS guy, Corey. Last week in AWS, that guy, Corey Quinn. You're right. Hey, read his blog, and according to it, everyone is like hugely overpaying for all their AWS stuff because they don't know how to configure it.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at it, he's just talking about really like a lot of the stuff that he fixes. It is just a lot of unused instances, EC2 instances and stuff. By definition, none of them are serverless. So I mean, and then they say, oh yeah, I mean, even with sometimes you have provision concurrency, which means like you keep some lambdas running all the time because you say, let's say you're gonna broadcast Super Bowl, right? So the initial scale, when the Super Bowl starts, the way it scales is so fast that even Lambda is not really fast enough to scale that quickly. So you keep some Lambdas running around. Even in those extreme situations, which are really, really rare, those are, financially speaking, they're just kind of peanuts, quarters and stuff. So that's none of the stuff that he deals with. That's the kind of the advantage of those kind of serverless cloud native stuff, DynamoDBs and SQSs and Lambdas and step functions. You don't pay when nobody's using it. Nobody pays.
Right. Yeah. If you're someone using it, then yes, that's definitely the case. Cool. See, what else we want to talk about? I can talk about operator overloading in Python if anyone cares.
Oof. That's the thing.
It is actually a little interesting.
Okay.
Because it's like a small tweak over like how operator overloading in like something C# does, but that small tweak enables so much other stuff. So let me share my screen again, or I'll share my browser. I'll share my screen. So if you look at how Python operator overloading works is basically most things in Python basically work by essentially calling methods on objects, like, and then these special by convention methods, and they're called dunder methods. So like if you call str on an object, the str function. It's actually doing double dispatch, right? It turns around and it calls that object underscore str underscore dunder method, right? So if you want to basically do a toString on an object in Python, you do that. If you want a constructor in Python, you use the by convention underscore the init dunder. If you want to override add, you override the add dunder, which is, and you'll notice that this is very similar to C#. The one difference is that this is not a static method; it's an instance method, which means you could do things like overriding in derived types. You could modify the instance itself and do lots of interesting stuff. So, like for example, there's a lot of different libraries that actually do that. Like their ORM. I'll look this up. SQL alchemy query. So the SQL alchemy ORM. Let's see if I can find a good example here. That's not really demonstrating what I want. Here, I'll jump to this. So if you were doing this in their ORM, oh my god, this stuff is just locking up. I really need to rebuild this computer or something. You would do something like let's say you had an object you wanted to query. You might do something like session.query person.name equals George, right? Not all. So what is that really doing under the hood when you do something like that? Well, person.name doesn't just return the name of the person. It's actually returning a object. And the object is probably some sort of type descriptor object. But one of the things it'll have on there is an equals dunder method. And when you call that equals dunder method, it takes an instance of this person class and the thing that you're doing, and then returns basically a filter definition, right? That's the sort of stuff you can do. So like that's how a lot of their querying building works. And there's different places where their DSL work, where they have DSLs that work that way. So one of them, for example, here's a functional programming library on Python. And you look at this and like, how the hell does it do this? So like underscore is not a special thing in Python at all. Like it's the same as other languages, not a special variable or anything like that. What's going on here is that underscore is imported from that functional programming library. So what's really happening is that right there is an instance of a class that has a dunder method that overwrites multiplication. And when the thing that you pass it is an actual number, what's it going to do? It's just going to return a lambda. So this right here is just a constructor for a lambda function that does x equals x times 2, right? This right here, that's just a constructor for a lambda function. This is just a constructor for a lambda function. Like here they have an example. Like if you're doing something like this, it just gets constructed into a lambda, which takes multiple parameters. So this right here, okay, that gets put together into a lambda, but it knows that this is there, so therefore, so then that gets passed into there, and now it can think through it and output everything like that. And that's the way actually like a decent amount of stuff in Python works that way, and it's all due to their little operator overloading trick, and it's 100% just because they did not make it static, which enables you to do all sorts of stuff like this. And to be honest, I've always, even before I learned Python, kind of how they did this, thought that the fact that operator overloading in C# is static, and I think Java was just such a big missed opportunity for no good reason. There's not a great reason why operators are static. I guess it's like some weird attempt to achieve the transitive property, but like not all operators are transitive, and also it still doesn't work like that. So it just basically, you let the object determine what calling that operator on it does. That's really it. So like it's easily the most powerful operator extension system I've seen since like IO, which is like pretty much like you can do anything with operators, or like Lisp, I guess, where they're not even operators. It's just like, here's a symbol, and then the macro you're running inside of it's going to figure out what it does. But so it really is like a half-assed way of doing it, but it ends up being so powerful that they can do all these various DSLs and APIs and stuff like that, like querying languages and everything.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's yep.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that.
And that takes up the rest of the time.
That's it. Yeah, just about when I'm running about out of battery here on this computer, and I didn't bring my charger here today.
Yeah.
Very good.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks everybody who joined in. Yeah.
Talk to y'all later. Bye.
Talk to you later.
Bye. All right. See you all next week. Bye.